Ladies and gentlemen, friends, seekers of growth and transformation, what if I told you that in just 21 days, you could rewire the most powerful supercomputer in the known universe? Your brain. What if the change you've been waiting for isn't hidden in some distant future, but available right here, right now, inside of you? Your brain is not a finished product. It is not a static machine that you're stuck with. It is a living, adapting, dynamic system that responds to how you think, how you act, and even how you focus your attention. For years, people believed the brain was fixed after childhood, locked into patterns that couldn't be changed. But modern neuroscience, and especially the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman, has proven that wrong. You are not your past. You are not your habits. You are not your mistakes. You are the architect of your mind. And the key tool at your disposal is something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change its structure and function based on experience. Every single day, your brain is either reinforcing old patterns or building new ones. If you repeat something often enough, the connections between the neurons that carry that behavior or thought pattern become stronger and more automatic. It's like walking through tall grass. The more you walk the same path, the more the grass flattens and the easier it becomes to walk that way again. Your brain is doing this constantly. The beautiful part is you get to decide whether to keep flattening the old path or start carving out a new one. This truth should light a fire inside you because it means change is not only possible, it's natural. You can rewire your brain to think more clearly, to act with more discipline, to feel less anxiety, to let go of the mental clutter that's been holding you back. But it doesn't happen through wishful thinking. It happens through repetition, attention, and focused effort. The mistake many people make is thinking they have to feel motivated first before taking action. But in reality, it's the action that reshapes the brain. And that rewiring generates the motivation later. You are literally changing the brain because your brain is in unconscious backup to be just like you were doing it before. And the way that actually works is by engaging your brain in states of focused effort. When you're alert and paying close attention, your brain releases certain neurochemicals, namely acetylcholine and dopamine, that signal the nervous system. This matters. Strengthen this connection. So when you're learning something new or trying to break an old habit, that discomfort, that friction you feel, that's not a bad sign. That's the brain's plasticity system turning on. It's telling you the change process has begun. And that means failure doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're trying to build a new circuit. When a child learns to walk, they fall over and over again, but each fall teaches the brain something new. Adults often fear failure, but in truth, every failure is a powerful tool for rewiring. If you reflect on it, adjust your behavior, and try again, your brain uses that feedback to carve out more effective circuits. That's neuroplasticity in action. Now, this is why repetition is critical. You can't just do something once and expect it to become automatic. The brain doesn't work that way. You must create intensity and consistency. Intensity means you give full attention and emotional energy to the change. Consistency means you do it again and again until the old pattern weakens and the new one becomes dominant. Humans research suggests that meaningful neuroplastic change begins around 7 to 14 days and becomes significantly more stable after 21 days of focused practice. That's why this 21-day window is so crucial. It's long enough to change the brain and short enough to stay committed. Another core principle is environment. Your brain is constantly scanning the world around you and using that information to decide what matters. So if you want to rewire your brain, you must also manage your surroundings. That means reducing distraction, building routines, and designing your physical space to support the new behavior. For example, if you're trying to build focus, remove distractions from your work area. If you're trying to eat healthier, don't keep junk food in the house. Make it easier for your brain to associate your environment with your new identity. The brain loves efficiency. The more you pair new habits with cues in your environment, the faster those habits become automatic. What's also powerful is understanding the role of identity in this process. Your brain responds not just to what you do, but to what you believe about yourself. If you say, I'm not a morning person, your brain reinforces that identity. If you say, I always fail when I try, your brain starts to build pathways that expect failure. But when you shift the story, when you start saying, I'm becoming someone who shows up early, or I'm learning how to stay consistent, your brain starts aligning with that new belief. This isn't just psychology, this is biology. Your thoughts activate neurons, and those neurons connect in real time. Dr. Huberman talks about the power of combining internal belief with external behavior. When you act in alignment with your new identity, even if it feels unnatural at first, your brain begins to adapt. You are training your nervous system to support your transformation. And the more you stay consistent, the more those circuits hardwire, eventually the new behavior stops feeling forced. It becomes who you are. There's something else to remember here. You are always rewiring your brain, whether you mean to or not. Every time you procrastinate, every time you complain, every time you avoid discomfort, your brain takes note. It's always learning. So instead of letting those patterns repeat unconsciously, why not take control? Why not intentionally choose the patterns you want to strengthen? This doesn't mean perfection, it means direction. The rewiring process is not about doing it right every time. It's about choosing the right target and moving toward it. Even small, imperfect steps matter. In fact, the brain often responds best to incremental improvement. Small wins build confidence, and confidence fuels further rewiring. So as you step into this 21-day journey, don't wait for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. What you need is intention, repetition, and clarity. Pick one behavior you want to change, focus your effort, remove distractions, pay attention to how you feel during and after, and don't stop. When you feel resistance, smile, because that's your brain changing. That's the old wiring being challenged. That's progress. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are simply wired in ways that were shaped by past experience. And now you get to reshape that wiring. You get to choose. And with 21 days of focused effort, you can start becoming the person your future is waiting for. Not by force, not by luck, but by rewiring your brain on purpose. Most people wake up and immediately start their day in reaction mode, scrolling through their phone, checking messages, or rushing into responsibilities. But what they don't realize is that the first few minutes after waking up set the tone for the entire brain. According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, your brain has a master clock, an internal timekeeper called the circadian rhythm that governs when you feel alert, focused, energized, and when you feel sleepy, fatigued, or emotionally drained. And the single most powerful way to align that internal clock is through light, specifically natural sunlight exposure in the early morning. This isn't some vague wellness advice. It's biological programming rooted deep in your nervous system. When you wake up, your eyes are connected directly to the brain via the optic nerve. In the retina are special cells, melanopsin-contained retinal ganglion cells, that don't help you see objects, but instead sense light intensity and send signals to a brain region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This region is the central control station for your circadian rhythm. It tells your body when to wake up, when to release hormones, when to prepare for focus, and when to begin winding down for sleep. When you step outside and expose your eyes to bright sunlight within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, you trigger a cascade of neurochemical events. Cortisol levels rise, not the kind of cortisol associated with chronic stress, but a healthy spike that supports alertness, metabolism, and immune function. Dopamine also begins to rise, enhancing your drive, mood, and motivation for the day. This healthy release of hormones and neurochemicals calibrates your brain's inner timer. It tells your body this is morning, this is time to be focused, this is when the work happens. If you miss this window, if you stay inside, if you rely only on artificial light, or if you don't get outside until later, your brain doesn't receive that anchoring signal. Your circadian rhythm drifts, and as a result, everything else suffers. You feel groggy when you should be alert, wired when you should be resting, anxious when you should be calm. Sleep quality goes down. Productivity suffers, mood dips. You might not even realize why you're off. It's because your brain's clock is misaligned. That's why Dr. Huberman calls this morning light ritual non-negotiable. It's not optional. If you're serious about rewiring your brain for clarity, discipline, and peak performance. So you say, I do these things in the mornings, they set me up for success. It's a foundational step. Just 10 minutes outside on a sunny day or 20 to 30 minutes on a cloudy day is enough to activate this process. And no, looking at sunlight through a window is not the same. It filters out the intensity your retina needs. You must be outside without sunglasses, allowing that natural light to enter your eyes safely. Not staring at the sun, but simply being exposed to ambient light in the environment. Once your circadian clock is anchored, your brain knows how to prepare you for focused work. This is where the next tool comes in. Deep focus blocks during your biological peak. For most people, that peak occurs within 1 to 3 hours after morning light exposure. This is the best time to engage in cognitively demanding tasks, writing, studying, learning, problem solving. During this window, your brain is naturally in a heightened state of alertness, tension is easier to sustain, memory formation is stronger, distractions have less power. Dr. Huberman recommends 90-minute focus sessions during this time, ideally free from digital interruptions, background noise, or unnecessary multitasking. The reason for the 90-minute recommendation comes from ultradian rhythms, natural cycles of heightened brain activity that last about an hour and a half. When you work within these cycles, you're not just working harder, you're working with your biology. You're tapping into the brain's own natural rhythms to encode information, solve problems, and stay in a flow state. To further support this process, Dr. Huberman suggests reducing or removing background stimulation during focus blocks. That means no music, no podcasts, no constant notifications. Why? Because when your brain gets dopamine from multiple sources at once, it becomes reliant on stimulation to perform. Then, when those layers are removed, motivation drops. So instead, you train your brain to find satisfaction in the effort itself, not in external rewards or distractions. This builds true mental resilience. You begin to crave the focus, not just the results. As the day progresses, your energy and attention naturally begin to decline. That's not a flaw. It's part of your biological rhythm, but how you manage that transition matters. Around midday or early afternoon, it's beneficial to take deliberate breaks that don't involve screens or noise. This is where protocols like non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, come into play, which we'll explore in detail later. For now, the key point is understanding that your brain operates best when aligned with the light-dark cycle and when given structured periods of focus followed by brief strategic recovery. Now, let's look at the flip side. What happens in the evening? As the sun sets, your brain needs to begin winding down. The problem is that artificial lighting, especially overhead LED lights and screens, tricks your brain into thinking it's still daytime. This delays melatonin production, the hormone responsible for preparing the body for sleep. When melatonin is suppressed, you may feel restless, take longer to fall asleep, or experience poor quality rest. And poor sleep means poor plasticity the next day. You can't expect your brain to rewire effectively if you're robbing it of its nightly recovery window. That's why evening light hygiene is just as important as morning exposure. In the final 2 hours before bed, reduce your exposure to bright lights, particularly blue light. Use dim, warmer colored lighting if possible. Avoid screens or wear blue light blockers if you must use devices. This signals to your brain, nighttime is here. It's time to power down. This simple shift enhances the depth of your sleep and the stability of your circadian rhythm, making it easier to wake up and perform the morning protocol again. Dr. Huberman often reminds us that all these protocols are connected. The way you sleep affects your focus. The way you focus affects your neuroplasticity. The way you interact with light affects all of it. When you align with your circadian rhythm, you're not just surviving your day, you're mastering it. You're using the same biological mechanisms that evolution shaped over thousands of years and applying them in a modern, structured way. So if you want to rewire your brain in 21 days, this is one of the most important steps you can take. Anchor your morning with sunlight. Schedule your deep work during your natural energy peak. Protect your evening with low light and calm. You don't need more hours in the day. You need to use your hours in alignment with your brain's inner clock. When you do that, something shifts. You stop feeling like you're constantly fighting against time, energy, and distraction. Instead, you feel synced, clear, purposeful, and that clarity is a sign that the rewiring has begun. This is not about hacks. This is about rhythm. And when your brain is in rhythm, success stops being random. It becomes automatic. Dopamine is a word that gets thrown around a lot, often misunderstood, reduced to ideas of pleasure or addiction. But in the context of rewiring your brain and achieving long-term change, dopamine is not just a feel-good chemical. It's the molecule of motivation, drive, and directed action. According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, understanding how dopamine works and learning how to regulate it consciously can completely reshape how you think, work, and live. Most people don't realize they're living in a constant loop of seeking dopamine hits from quick, shallow sources, social media likes, sugary snacks, entertainment, or passive scrolling. These behaviors flood the brain with dopamine temporarily, but they come with a cost. After the spike comes the crash, and your baseline levels of dopamine fall below what they were before. That's when you feel unmotivated, unfocused, or even anxious and depressed. And that creates a vicious cycle where the brain keeps looking for the next hit just to feel normal again. Dr. Huberman teaches that the key to long-term motivation and real brain change lies in learning how to manage and protect your dopamine system. One of the most powerful ideas he shares is to attach dopamine not to the outcome, but to the effort. Most people wait until they see results before they allow themselves to feel good. They grind through work hoping that when they reach the goal, then they can be proud. But the science shows that this mindset is flawed. When you only reward the result, you weaken your brain's intrinsic motivation. But when you start associating pleasure with the process, the act of showing up, the discipline of doing hard things, the focus during deep work, your brain starts releasing dopamine during the action itself. That changes everything. Now your brain begins to crave the work. It starts to build neural pathways that associate effort with reward. That's how champions are made, not by relying on external motivation, but by rewiring the brain to find satisfaction in the struggle. This process is called effort-based dopamine release, and it's one of the most reliable ways to build sustainable habits and high performance. Imagine doing something difficult, waking up early, pushing through a workout, learning a new skill, and instead of dreading it, you start to feel empowered by it. That's what happens when dopamine is aligned with action. It becomes fuel. But there's a danger here too. The modern world is full of what Dr. Huberman calls dopamine stacking. This is when people combine multiple sources of stimulation at once. Listening to music while scrolling social media, while eating junk food, while gaming. Every added stimulus boosts dopamine higher and higher, but it also accelerates the crash that follows. Your brain gets overwhelmed. It adapts by lowering your baseline dopamine, meaning it takes more and more stimulation just to feel okay. This is how motivation burns out. It's not because you're lazy, it's because your brain is chemically exhausted. The way out is not to eliminate dopamine. It's to become intentional about how you use it. That starts with lowering the frequency and intensity of artificial dopamine hits. Spend some time without stimulation. Walk without headphones. Eat without screens. Allow yourself to be bored. When you reduce overstimulation, your brain becomes more sensitive to natural sources of dopamine again. This is called dopamine reset. It's like rebooting your system so that small wins feel meaningful again. You'll find joy in a deep breath, pride in completing a task, energy in simplicity. Once your baseline stabilizes, you can begin to recondition your brain using strategic effort. Pick one thing you want to build, a habit, a skill, a mindset, and start pairing it with intentional focus and emotional reward. When you sit down to write, remind yourself that you are building mental strength. When you push through a workout, smile at the discomfort. Tell your brain, this is the feeling of growth. The more you repeat this pattern, the stronger the connection becomes. Soon, that habit stops requiring discipline. It becomes wired into your identity. Dr. Huberman also emphasizes the importance of rest in this process. Dopamine is not infinite. It depletes with use, and it needs recovery time to replenish. That's why it's so important not to grind endlessly. Schedule breaks that allow your nervous system to reset. Use tools like non-sleep deep rest, deliberate breathing, or even just short walks outside without stimulation. These moments of calm help your brain restore its chemical balance. You return to your work with more clarity, more motivation, and a deeper sense of presence. Another powerful tool is anticipation. The brain releases dopamine not just when you get a reward, but when you expect it. This means you can use the power of visualization and structured planning to build motivation. Start each day with a clear vision of what you will do and why it matters. Break big goals into small, clear actions. Then, as you move through the day, your brain receives mini dopamine hits for each completed step. This creates forward momentum. Progress becomes addictive, not because of a finish line, but because of a consistent, rewarding process. Dr. Huberman explains that when you train your brain to love effort, you create something rare, freedom. You no longer depend on perfect circumstances, perfect moods, or constant entertainment to stay consistent. You become self-propelled. Your motivation is no longer fragile. It's anchored in biology, and because it's based in effort, it scales. The more you push, the more energy you generate. It's a feedback loop of growth. This is how true neuroplastic change happens. It's not about hacks or gimmicks. It's about engaging the brain's reward system in a conscious, deliberate way. Every time you choose effort over ease, every time you delay gratification, every time you embrace discomfort with intention, you are rewiring your brain at the most fundamental level. And after 21 days of consistent, effort-based action, those new circuits become stronger than the old ones. You stop falling back into distractions. You start rising into discipline. Dopamine is not your enemy. It's your compass. But only when you stop letting it be hijacked by the external world and start directing it from within. The process is simple, but not easy. You must be mindful. You must be honest with yourself. But if you commit, if you truly embrace the path of deliberate effort, You'll wake up one day and realize you're not just trying anymore. You've become someone new, someone wired for growth, someone who craves the work, someone who leads their life from the inside out. The modern world constantly tells you to go faster, to do more, to keep pushing, grinding, chasing the next milestone. But the truth is, growth doesn't come from endless effort. It comes from effort followed by recovery. Without recovery, the brain cannot rewire, consolidate, or integrate anything new. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of human performance and self-transformation. People think they're lazy if they take breaks, guilty if they rest, or weak if they slow down. But according to Dr. Andrew Huberman, one of the most powerful tools for rewiring the brain is not another productivity hack or high-intensity habit. It's intentional mental and physical restoration. It's learning how to reset your nervous system on demand. And the most effective protocol he shares is called NSDR, or non-sleep deep rest. NSDR is a technique that puts your brain into a state similar to deep sleep without actually falling asleep. It involves lying down or sitting in a quiet space, closing your eyes, slowing your breath, and entering a guided or self-directed state of complete relaxation. It can look like yoga nidra, body scanning, or even certain types of self-hypnosis. The science behind it is remarkable. When you enter an NSDR state, your brainwaves shift from beta, the alert thinking state, into alpha and even theta waves, which are more relaxed and creative. During this time, your body starts to reduce stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate slows down, your breathing deepens, your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and repair system, activates, and most importantly, dopamine levels begin to reset. Dr. Huberman emphasizes that NSDR is not a luxury or bonus. It is a critical piece of the neuroplasticity puzzle. When you push your brain during focused learning or training, you create a state of heightened plasticity. You're essentially opening a window where your neurons are more malleable, but the actual rewiring, the consolidation of new connections, happens during the rest phase. This is why elite performers, whether they're athletes, musicians, special forces, or high-level entrepreneurs, schedule recovery just as seriously as they schedule effort. They understand that growth lives in the space between action and reflection. The beauty of NSDR is that it doesn't require special equipment, supplements, or long time commitments. Just 10 to 20 minutes a day can have dramatic effects. It's been shown to improve memory retention, accelerate learning, reduce fatigue, increase emotional control, and elevate mood. In fact, studies have found that one session of NSDR can restore the brain's dopamine levels in a way that's comparable to several hours of sleep. For people who suffer from burnout, insomnia, or chronic mental fatigue, this tool is a game changer. It gives the nervous system what it desperately needs. Pause, but NSDR is not the only tool in the recovery toolkit. Breath work is another. Dr. Huberman explains that specific breathing patterns can rapidly shift your brain state by affecting the balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. One of the most effective is called cyclic sighing. It involves a double inhale through the nose, one big breath followed by a shorter top off, and then a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Doing just a few rounds of this can immediately reduce anxiety, slow the heart rate, and bring the brain into a state of calm alertness. Unlike meditation, which requires longer practice and mental training, cyclic sighing works instantly. It is physiological control of psychological state. The power of breath lies in its direct connection to the brainstem, where your most primitive survival systems live. When you change your breath, you send signals up the vagus nerve, which tells your brain, I'm safe, I can relax, I can recover. In moments of stress, overwhelm, or exhaustion, this is the tool you reach for. Not a screen, not a snack, not a distraction. Your breath becomes your anchor. And the more you practice it, the more control you gain over your mind and body. Now, why does this matter in the context of rewiring your brain in 21 days? Because transformation is not just about doing new things, it's about sustaining them. And sustainability requires balance. You cannot stay in a state of constant strain and expect your brain to adapt positively. Chronic stress, even from positive efforts, floods your system with cortisol that shuts down the brain's plasticity mechanisms. You may feel like you're being productive, but you're actually reinforcing anxiety, fatigue, and self-sabotage. By scheduling recovery, you allow your nervous system to process, reorganize, and rebuild. It's also important to understand that your brain doesn't differentiate much between physical and mental stress. Whether you're lifting weights, solving complex problems, or dealing with emotional pressure, the strain on your nervous system is real, and it needs to be balanced with real recovery. This is why sleep is another critical pillar. No amount of productivity can replace the power of quality sleep. During sleep, especially deep sleep and REM stages, Your brain goes through a cleansing process. It clears metabolic waste, strengthens neural connections formed during the day, and consolidates memory and learning. A single night of poor sleep can impair focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation the next day. Over time, chronic sleep deprivation erodes your capacity to change. So the complete recovery system looks like this: NSDR during the day, especially after high-effort work; breath work when stress hits unexpectedly or when you need to reset quickly; and consistent, high-quality sleep at night. Together, these practices build a brain that's resilient, adaptable, and calm under pressure. They restore your baseline energy and mental clarity so that when it's time to focus again, you're not dragging your mind through the mud. You're operating at your natural best. Dr. Huberman's work makes it clear that rest is not the opposite of productivity, it is the foundation of it. Without structured recovery, all the tools in the world won't work. Your brain won't rewire if it's constantly overwhelmed. But when you alternate periods of intense focus with deep rest, you create the ideal conditions for growth. You create a rhythm that the brain recognizes and responds to. This is how long-term change becomes sustainable. So if you're committed to rewiring your brain in 21 days, don't fall into the trap of constant output. Build in breaks. Use NSDR like a performance reset. Learn to breathe through the chaos and treat your sleep like it's your secret weapon, because it is. The quiet moments, the slow breaths, the stillness, this is where the real transformation takes hold. You won't always see it happening, but you will feel it. You'll wake up clearer, calmer, more focused, more in control. And over time, those moments of recovery become the soil where your new habits take root and grow strong. This is the final piece of the puzzle. And it might just be the most important one.